And round two, because the audio was muted. So, I
That's
am
what.
James from Tabletop Misfits, and this is Tavern Talks, where we drink beer, talk D&D, and have fun. I'm here back with Chris from Dungeon Studios, and we have our new friend Russell from Down Under, and we are going to have a conversation on how to get an adventure started, what you might want to think about, and how to make it fun for both your players and game masters. So before we do anything, Russell, just a quick overview who you are and how you got into D&D or tabletop gaming
Oh,
in general.
quick overview. That's you're asking for. That's tricky. Okay, quickly. My God. Okay, so I'm a professional dungeon master. I work for a company called Questbook here in New Zealand. I'm also a writer, actor, director. I've made films and things. I was in Hollywood for a while. I run a stream on Twitch called the Vein Gate Chronicles. That's Sidariel, um, which is the name of the URL. Blah blah blah. I'll post that later if I'm allowed. Um, and how I got into D&D was I was living in Papua New Guinea as a child, which is basically a third world country, sort of somewhere in the Pacific. Um, and I had a friend who was like, "Hey, do you want to play D&D?" And I was like, "Yeah, sure." And we spent like 6 months pissing around with character sheets and maps and stuff, going, "How do you play this game?" Because we had no idea. This was the '80s, and this was first edition, and it was Oriental Adventures was the first version I ever played. And then one day I said, "Hey, what if I draw a map and I like literally ask you, like, what do you do and where do you go and stuff?" And he's like, "Yeah, yeah, that's how you're supposed to play this game." And it's like, "What? Why didn't you tell me that 6 months ago?" So we literally figured out how to play D&D from the book, which was incredibly cryptic back in those days. So thank your lucky stars, you have fifth edition that is very clear and concise, and you have streams like this one and Critical Role and shit like that, so that you don't have to figure out how to play the game from these books written by a bunch of nerds in the 70s. So there you go. That's my take on the whole thing.
All right. So yeah. So Russell's coming here with a lot more experience even than myself, and Chris being our newcomer with only a year of experience. Though I do want to make a notice that though we all have different experiences and different time frames, we each bring a different view to the game. Somebody who's coming in just in fifth edition and understanding just that setup does have a different viewpoint than somebody like myself or Russell who have been through multiple editions and seeing the pros and cons of what that could provide. As well as with everything going on in uh, tabletop role playing right now, between the changing of what they're doing with the drow, the stuff they're doing with orcs and goblins, the idea that we're going to that evil is not really evil in every way, shape, or form anymore. Paladins can actually be neutral or evil. Just weird things that we weren't especially used to. He's perfectly understood with and has no problem with. But tonight, before we dive down another rabbit hole that lasts another 3 hours, we are going to talk about starting an adventure as a game master. You've got a brand new set of people at your table. You have never met them before, or you have, either good friends or not. What is your what is the first thing you do? Chris, I'm going to ask you first. As the newest guy in out of the three of us, and we'll kind of go around the table.
The first thing I do is I get character background stories. I like as we discussed. So we're assuming now that you've created your pantheon, you've created your world, and now you're ready to throw your players in, and you want to figure out what your campaign is and what you're going to be dealing with. So things to consider is like the background story. A lot of the times, your players are a lot more creative than you think, and they come up with things that are just amazing. And if you are having trouble with your writing, you can sometimes refer to your character's background story because they're probably gonna fill some slots for you, some spots that haven't been quite filled for you as the writer. And then I think from there you want to. So now you have your players' characters. Now you want to know your players. So like James, you mentioned you may not be playing with people you know. You may just now with COVID and everything that we're dealing with, people going online, posting means through Discord, through Zoom, and other media, that um, there's a chance that you're going to get people that you're not really going to know. So you're going to want to know who you're playing with and what their expectations are going to be from your campaign. Because you have people that are like, man, I really don't care if I ever make a roll for damage. I just want to role play. You got people that are just like, no, man, I want heavy combat. So if you get like a mix of people, you're gonna want to know, because like, especially if you're putting yourself out there as a DM and you're trying to be like, a pay to play kind of DM, you're gonna want your players to be happy, and you're also going to want that word of mouth to spread. You want person A to go to person B and be like, wow, you should have played this campaign with this guy. The DM was super fun. He totally had me, involved in everything and every aspect, and I hope that he created. And I feel like that's a really good way to start with your players.
Okay. So it's similar to how I start. I very often, depending on if I'm bringing a brand new campaign together or if I'm bringing in somebody into the world that I designed, if I'm bringing in somebody that I've designed, of course, I give them a small backstory of the world itself, of what's going on in the world and whatnot. But a lot of times, I don't have anything because these are brand new players and they want to do their own. They want their own world. They want their own design, their own story. And at that point, you're asking those strange questions to your players. We actually had a conversation about this last stream with Corey, where we came up with the idea of a negative one, a session -1. And what that does is it allows your players to be not only involved in their story, but involved in the big picture. My main thing is to make sure that my players feel and believe that they are involved and intricate to the story, because you want them to be the hero. And that is my main focus, no matter if I'm playing a one shot, if I'm playing a long term campaign, if I'm playing with friends, or if I'm playing with people that are paying me to play. I'm also a paid game master, though mine's all done through my own company. I wish sometimes, if anybody wants to sponsor me, you're more than welcome to come and hit me up. But yeah, that's where I normally start. Russell, now you being a professional game master for a company, how do you start a campaign that you've either never known the players or it's your best friends and they're across the street?
Well, I mean, first of all, if it's a paid game, usually people are coming to it because they've seen an advert for it, and there's usually an outline in the advert that says this is what the deal is. It's going to be my campaign world. I almost exclusively run my games in Sidar, which is my campaign setting for my stream. So there's a little bit of crossover between those things. They can expect to meet NPCs that they might have seen on the stream, for example. My objective is to make sure that when they start playing literally session one, we have boots on the ground and they know who their characters are, they know what the given circumstances are, they know a little bit of background, and they're capable of playing their characters to, a certain degree, a pretty decent degree, to be honest. I'm one of these DMs, unfortunately, that dumps people with a whole bunch of backstory and world details and all that stuff, maps and history. Like I've got a document called A Brief History of Sidariel on my desktop, which is like, I don't know, it's like 14 pages or something. I don't expect people to read the whole thing, but they sort of look at it and go, oh, there's a lot of stuff here. I also have a lot of racial restrictions and stuff like that. I prefer to play using the player's handbook, basically, and if people want to play something outside of that, they kind of have to apply to me with an idea that is good enough to warrant that. Because in my experience, most people that want to play Tabashi and all sorts of other weird, wonderful races are looking for a mask to hide behind, and that gets in the way of role playing from my point of view. So, my approach to the adventure itself, my approach to world building too is also take an examination of a central question. So, what is war? What is mercy? What is something like that? That's the central question that we're going to examine in this campaign. That becomes the theme. And so I'm looking to create NPCs and storylines that are going to highlight the theme and that are going to be polarized so that they create drama. I'm going to expect my players, or not expect my players, but assist my players into creating characters that are rooted in the story and in the locations and in the world, that have NPCs that are part of their backstories, and that they're included in that whole thing. Yeah, so I don't know. Does that answer the question? Kinda.
Yeah, no, it definitely does. I think we all have this concept of how we would bring our players to the table, and it's interesting because if you
Yeah,
look into chapter 3, which is kind
it's
of what we've started doing, is we're diving through the Dungeon Master's Guide. You know, this
right.
massive tome that nobody ever reads fully, but you pick and choose as you need to find places for your information. Um, the one thing
What
I
you said
liked
about a sorry.
No, the one thing I liked about what you said though is you pick a theme, a
Right.
non just a non tangible theme, something that you isn't just like bad guy go kill. No, no, no. Greed,
You like a
mercy,
comp.
stuff that you can
The
wrap a
current game is
munch.
about essentialism is the current theme in my stream, right? We're asking about racism, systemic racism, and the player characters are playing. They're playing characters that have cultural baggage. They're mostly playing elves that hate orcs, for example, because they're orcs, and over the course of the story, they're learning that orcs are not just plain evil. That this is not a thing. They're actually learning that they are racist and discovering this and having to confront that. And I think that's kind of interesting. It's an interesting exploration, and I assume, based on the feedback, that the audience finds it similarly interesting.
So
I think
we do a similar thing in our stream. Is we run through a world called Zayathe, which is ran by a company called GUI Cube out in Colorado, and we've taken their world and we've taken their setting and we've given our own little spin to it for our stream. But their idea is that certain races aren't what you're used to. The Arachnoids, which is the orc type races like orcs and goblins, are actually able to build full on civilizations and understand, and some are pulling away from the idea that war is everything, and you're watching the pull not only between different races but within themselves. And it's all designed on this idea that these characters who are known as extras have these extra abilities or these things that are different about them. How do they fit into the world when everybody hates them because they believe that they're the reason behind the massive problem that happened in the world many, many, many years ago? And we've been diving through that story, and we're continuing to dive through that story pretty much for the entirety of the campaign.
I've actually been trying to do something very similar with what we're doing over on the Dungeon Stream Studios. Taking that natural racism that's in the vanilla D&D and writing it completely out. So you can play a tiefling and be able to walk into a village and it's going to be okay. Uh, the world dealing with such a large cataclysm as the Shattering, shaking the world and reshaping it in the way that it did, I feel like that would bring societies together. So let's try to get rid of that commentary and that feel, and let's just make everybody feel included. Um,
Yeah.
and I feel like D&D is like with media and the way it's so vastly growing, that D&D is one of those things that is kind of trailing behind everybody else when it comes to that moving forward. But we're getting there. We're
Well,
getting
part
there.
of the problem with Dungeons and Dragons, if I can interrupt you here, is
Absolutely.
that you've got the situation where, first of all, we have alignments, and we're looking. People are basically looking for a story where they get to go out and go on an adventure and kill some stuff and collect some loot, which basically underlying that is a very corporate, capitalist, colonial approach to life. Nobody is going out going, I'm going to go on a quest to save the world because evil Saruman is wanting to take over the world. No, we're doing it because we want loot, basically. That's the underlying problem. And once you introduce alignment to that, it just gets worse.
Hmm.
So the basically, if we can avoid having characters going out and just killing stuff because they want loot, by motivating characters and motivating players to create characters that are in fact characters and not caricatures, that eliminates a lot of these problems.
Yes.
So that's
Yeah.
an
No. I
interesting question. Oh, sorry. Go, Chris.
Oh, I just said I agree. That's cool.
Oh, okay. No, so that brings up an interesting point, and we'll definitely have to have you back because this is one thing that I love figuring out is how you as a game master help your players build characters. But that's going to be a different show completely. Well, not a different show, but a different episode.
But I must say that for me, you asked the initial original question was
Yeah,
about how to start the adventure, and
yeah.
to me, making sure that the players have the right characters is uber important.
Okay.
You know, I don't just let my players create whatever characters they want because they invariably they end up playing making characters that are not really suitable for this particular story. They have to understand the story, or at least where it's going. Um, and I know that sounds really anal and controlling, but my players do enjoy it, and I do actually, have clients. So, despite the counterintuitiveness of that,
No, and I think
I
that's interesting because a lot of people think this whole idea, and this is where you get into some very hot topic of this idea of railroading and making sure that your players don't just have free reign of absolutely everything. One thing I always
the
tell my
illusion
players, yeah,
of
the illusion
victory.
of choice, right? If they go down left or they go right, guess what? They're getting where they need to be. That kind of thing.
Yeah,
And that can be
absolutely.
as simple as literally a road, or that can be as complex as you speaking to this character about this topic would have not changed the conversation if you would have spoken to the other character about the same topic.
I think it's not. It's really not going to hurt a campaign to have like an understanding of what the world is and what the story is, because then you're just gonna get really wonky role playing and character interactions with these guys. That's like realistically, they would have nothing to do with this party. They would have nothing to do with this mission. They would literally just these are the kind of characters who walk by and be like, "Yeah, you do that thing, cool. I'm out."
Right,
Right?
exactly. Trying to get the characters motivated to actually do the mission. That's the first step, and creating characters, making sure that the characters have buy-in to the scenario. If they don't have that, then you're screwed. You're not going anywhere fast.
I'm actually going to be starting my own stream within the coming weeks. It's going to be the Crows of the Damned. It's going to be a very horror-based uh, D&D, horror games, horror media. Um, and one of the things I'm doing for my players in the campaign that I will be showing there is I have them so they are able to make whatever race, whatever whatever they want, class or anything, but they do have the understanding that you were all a group at one point. You all adventured together. We'll have a session zero where we kind of hash out all those details of how you guys got to know each other, how you guys got to know the main NPC that's going to carry you into the story. And I've ran another group through this exact campaign before, and that worked great. I had as soon as the players walked in and saw the NPC that they were supposedly there to meet and that they would have known for years. They already had lines to say for him right off the bat because they're like, "Oh, you remember this time we did this?" Because we already talked that all out to the session zero, and it's still they had all that choice with that one tiny little, you know,
Yes.
restriction, right? Like you, in other campaigns, sometimes maybe they're a part of a thieves guild or a mercenary guild, and it's not really railroading. You're just giving them something to write their backgrounds around, and they could still come up with new extra content that's will still fit and will still make it so everybody's like, as they're playing, they feel like this is more than just a game. I feel like this is my favorite book. You get those feelings when you read a book and you're following it, and you get that character and the NPC dies, and you're reading the book and you're like, oh man, I'm not crying. There's dust on the book. I swear.
And
Um,
that's my objective as a DM is to see my audience, to see my players cry, and not because the game is terrible, but because they actually give a shit. Because the story is that good. I had an NPC die in a game once, and one of my players didn't speak to me for 2 weeks. Like the whole group bawled their eyes out, and this happens regularly. Not to be honest, not so much in D&D, but mostly in Vampire the Masquerade, but still in D&D too. Where you can watch your players cry if they're not afraid to actually go that far into character. Because this is not going to happen if you let your players create murder hobos. If they don't have any buy-in, if all they care about is their stats and their min-maxing and their power gaming, they're not buying into their characters. A character is not a list of feats or an inventory.
And okay, so you were saying that, and it just kind of made me think about how some players. I know this is a little off topic, so I'm going to be really quick about this, but you get this thing where you have these players that they swear, I'm against the DM. He's the villain, right? I'm out to break his game, and I'm like, do you think for 1 minute that we spent these hours upon hours writing around your character because we're out to get you? Do you even think that we're like sitting back there? It's like, ooh, saving death throws. He might have to roll up a new character, and then I have to write another arc. It's not like that, man. I don't know where that mentality comes from.
It ties into min-maxing too. The idea that they have to like make their characters as optimized as possible. Have you not realized that I can just give my NPCs more hit points?
Yeah.
Right?
Are you stupid? Like honestly, I can just change the arm like this. I can change the armor class. I can just look at your roll and say you miss.
I just homebrewed a new shield spell for them just on the spot. Now they get +10 to their AC.
Right. Exactly.
If any of my players are listening, I do this all the time.
This is called, in my opinion, I mean, I made a video about this actually. I call it regulating story and character, or story, combat and story. Because as a DM, you're telling, there's a certain amount of storytelling. And to be honest with you, you can play a game that's a simulation, and I've done that many times, and it's like World of Warcraft. Why don't you go and play World of Warcraft? It's better at it. It's a good calculator. It does all the maths. Do that. Don't do that. But if you want a story and you want to play a role-playing game and actually exploit the best possible qualities of a role-playing game for storytelling. That's what it's good at. Tell a story. If you want to tell a story, play World of Warcraft.
My wife even said that. I love that you brought up that exact example because I have a player who's hardcore, like, I'm out to get you, DM, and he's like crazy stats, and she's just like, play Warframe, dude. And let's get back to it gets back to the like, man, I don't want to kill your characters. I'm sweating anytime you have to make
so much work into my 3-year-long freaking campaign and
kill you.
Why would I do that?
Yeah, exactly. But anyway, continuing on. I took us off.
No, I mean, it makes perfect sense, and the idea that we have this goal to slaughter our campaign. I mean, I've worked countless hours weekly for months to make you as a character feel involved in the world and intricate to the world just so I can turn you to dust and we got to restart this whole process? No.
There are much worse things than death.
Well, that's true too.
Killing characters is too easy.
Yeah.
I have a guy that kind of ducked out and hasn't been back to the campaign, and his character is to this day falling in the elemental plane of air.
Oh, nice.
I can't wait till he comes back. I keep like looking in to see if he gets up on our message board. He hasn't been there in a bit, and I'm just like, man, I really want you to come back.
But these are so. Before we just jump down another hole, we've got a question here. So, on the topic of adventures, if you commit to running a module, so we're taking a D&D module and you're making it your own, but you're finding that the story just isn't taking off or the players aren't getting involved, what would be your suggestions other than just scrap the campaign and restart to a new campaign? But if you actually are planning to stick because they like the premise of the module, but they're not liking the way the book's writing it, what would you do?
So what you're saying is if you don't like the look of the module and you're trying to write around that?
It's not working.
It's not working for...
The players are not engaging with the material.
try to just enhance that material. I find NPCs are a amazing tool to get your players involved. I've used them plenty of times to guide players and to progress the stories. I honestly I feel NPCs are literally the greatest tool,
NPCs
and
are everything.
oh, they're big time. So
It's the
if
core.
you need to put in a new NPC that maybe if part of the problem that you're having could be that you have all these little clues here and there and your players are just really struggling to connect the dots. Throw in a divination wizard NPC or a clairvoyant NPC that they could come across at a carnival or something, and that like I've done it before where I've had a carnival, someone clairvoyant going in, um, doing like the whole psychic thing, coming up with a lot of like fortune cookie stuff, and then for one player, all of a sudden they just like go into a psychic trance, and bam, you get like this huge piece just plopped right on your lap. Like, here you go. Now the lady faints. Um, things
Got
like
some,
these.
yeah, I've got some thoughts too about this because, like, from the point of view, like, I had a whole life as a filmmaker at one point, before I became a professional dungeon master, and I sort of had some experience of adapting other people's scripts. And sometimes that's fucking awful, if I can say that on
Yeah,
television.
you're fine.
Because
We do a
frequently you
mature
get
game.
something,
We're good.
right? You get some sort of some script or it's a module in this case that just it doesn't work for you. Somebody wants to run it, and you're like, oh, let's do this then. All right. And as I'm sorry, your name was Chris. As Chris said, NPCs are the core of all of that. There's a game. There's a particular module that I really do like, which is called Chicago by Night, which is a Vampire the Masquerade game. I keep going on about this. Please forgive me. The module's about this thick. It's got 80 vampire NPCs in the book. It has no stories as NPCs. It's all it has. It has diagrams of the interrelationships of those NPCs to show you who hates who works with who likes who, all the different cliques, all the different little groups and societies and so on, the clans, who's all of that stuff, all the relationships of the NPCs. If you understand the motives and the relationships of the NPCs in your module or your homebrew, you are 100 light years ahead of the game. Now you can literally react to whatever the players are doing in character through the NPCs. Somebody does something in game, there's a rumor that goes around through the back channels around the story. These sorts of things happen. Knowing who your NPCs are and what their objectives are and what their motivations are and their relationships is the key to everything dungeon master wise. That's the answer to almost all of your problems. And if you're adapting something and you're not enjoying it, or the players are not enjoying it, maybe you need to examine the NPCs a little further. Maybe you need to develop the NPCs a little further. You can throw in a new NPC, or you can change an existing NPC and develop their story arcs, tie them into the stories that the characters are having. All of those NPCs are doing stuff, right? They've all got projects. They're not just sitting on their asses waiting for the players to come along and walk in the door so they can go, "Hi, how can I help you? Hi, how can I help you? Hi, how can I help you?" Right? They're not. Again, this is not World of Warcraft. The NPCs are not cardboard cutouts. Make them characters.
Yeah,
That's the answer, I think.
Yeah.
I agree with you 100%, man. Actually, like I said, I've used NPCs a lot to help us out. Actually, you know what? I totally forgot the point I was going to get to. So, no.
Probably
Sorry.
derailed you.
And
I'm
the
so sorry.
and
No,
the,
you didn't.
the rabbit
Actually, it
hole
was
dived again.
talking. It's your talking triggers a thought in my head. So I didn't even have that thought until you started.
Oh,
And then
well,
it
that's a good
just
thing then.
out the window it goes. I'll
I'll
be
just talk more shit
right.
than.
So
Uh,
that's interesting because you do see where a lot of times where NPCs are either they're placed into these categories, but you always have to realize again that they're still characters. And a lot of times the way I have viewed it is they're player character. You're playing multiple players, but you're not actually just the person who's there at that exact moment because he's waiting on the players to get there. No, no, no. There's a step process before that that the players might find out or know or could know, but or don't. Either way, there's a process that had to make that person be at that spot at the right time and whatnot.
So I
Players
remembered.
don't come to Strahd. Strahd come to players.
Yeah.
So I remembered something. You were talking about spreading rumors, like
Right.
the other thing. And then when I was starting off as a DM, I didn't even know about those extra downtime things. And there's a lot of sources online for a lot of downtime activities and way to really up the ante on the role playing aspect. And if you're having trouble with some of your stuff, you can use something like that to try to incorporate more of the characters into the story. So, for instance, I had a player who used his downtime to spread a rumor, and the rumor was basically that his PC was, even though it was only 1 foot tall, was the mightiest in his group, and was basically responsible for the liberation of Purveyor's Port. So he got such a high roll on his spreading his rumors that I had to go all across the continent. And it got to a point where they got to the main city in this continent. And when they got there, they found out, and I spent 2 weeks writing this out, man, and rehearsing and getting this ready. They got to the city and they found out there was going to be a theatrical play of their adventure. I had music, I had a score for the whole thing. I had written out how the lighting was going to work in certain scenes, who got the red light, who got the green light, the yellow, the blue. And you know what? It was probably the best moment for my players that they ever had. And they didn't make any rolls or anything. It was just me sitting there and reading, like, one of the characters. My wife's character is a cleric who is kind of like a Joan of Arc character. And she doesn't want anybody to know that she's a girl. So when her character comes out on stage, it's an elven actor that comes out, and he's just like, "I am John, and I am the manliest in the group." You know, like, it's just really playing on that and their little quirks and finding ways to kind of flip that and exaggerate it to make it fit a theatrical thing. And that was all just because of a player rolling rumors, right? So if you give them like extra things to do on their downtime, this could really open things up, which also could lead us in our conversation to roll tables.
Funny thing is too, like I've people talk about downtime. I don't even do downtime. I make players do that shit on screen. Like if you're gonna go around spreading a rumor, you're literally gonna have to go to an NPC and role play that scene.
Oh
I have
yeah.
this whole thing where I have a convention in my games where this means timeout. If you do this, you want to say something out of character. If you don't do this, I assume you're in character, and everything that comes out of your mouth is in character. And if you say something that's out of character without doing this, I'm going to make fun of you. You're going to look like a fool. And you'll very quickly get the idea that it doesn't work. In
I
the
really
end,
like that, man.
I'm not extremely anal about it because that would make it unfun. And you only need to do it enough times to remind the players to stay in character. But it really works. And you can have whole sessions with just role playing and no combat, and people are having fun. Amazing.
And
Amazing.
if you get new players too, one thing that you can really do to sort of push that point to them without directly saying it is like, last campaign I ran, I made sure every time, like, we had a spellcaster. So the first time he was a warlock, first time he casted Eldritch Blast, it's like, okay, flavor it for me, will you? Right? And he's like, okay, so my character just jumps to the side, holds out his hands like a gun, and boom, and he described how these like purple particle beams kind of fly out, right? And it was just like, and that kind of set the bar after that. And then after he did that, everybody else was like, oh, my character does this and that, and they're really describing their combat, and that also started to bleed out into the role playing as well.
So we played a impromptu game last night with one of my paid groups where one of the players was not able to make it. And we took a backstory from one of the other players that was within the story I grabbed a snippet out of it, which was literally a paragraph, and I said, "Hey, guess what? Here's your scenario tonight." They built a entire. The idea is that there was a village of retired adventurers, people who decided that they didn't want to try to lose their lives every day anymore, and they just went off and wanted to do their own thing. At that point, they went to they're playing through a mixed version of a twisted version rather of Horde of the Dragon Queen because they all wanted to play, they wanted to fight the dragon and all that. I said that's fine, we'll play that. But I made them play a mercenary party. I said, hey, this is your scenario. You all get to create level 5 characters. You get one magic item. You have 15 minutes to build it. I said, but be ready because I'm going to put you on the spot all night. And it was probably one of the most fun I've had in a while of just watching players come up with their own story immediately on the spot. I mean, it was to the point where I was like, hey, what's your name? Oh, I'm this. Okay, what are you wearing? Oh, I'm wearing this. And then as they were talking, I would bring up things like, oh, as you're sitting in the bar, you start to think and reminisce about the last time you were in a dungeon and you felt the cold air coming across your skin. And I was like, where were you? And there, you watch the whole party freeze for a second, and then somebody speaks up, and they build the story again, and they build the story again. And then you no longer are writing the story. You're letting your players completely dictate the entirety of the story. And then in the end, of course, surprisingly enough, two players' characters interweaved their actual characters through this interaction that happened beforehand without even knowing.
It's always really nice to have players who are prepared to work with the other players in their backstories. It makes everything so much easier. I mean, siblings are amazing to play with if you've got
Mm-hmm.
characters that are siblings because they'll do anything to protect them, to protect each other, and they have joined, conjoined objectives, this kind of thing. So it's pretty cool, yeah. So if you get the sort of thing happening.
Yeah.
Sorry.
I'm actually still waiting for these two of my players to play as this one character they've been talking about that are going to be sort of brothers in arms. One's a feral tiefling, and the other's an Asimir, but they're both children that disguise themselves as an adult man by standing on each other's shoulders wearing a trench coat. So I'm still waiting to see that guy. I can't wait to see how they play with each other. Especially like sometimes with their other characters, they tend to butt heads every now and then. So I'm really curious to see them play something like that. I think that's you gotta love your players sometimes, eh? They're just so inspiring, and it's just I've been blessed. I've been very fortunate in my short time DMing. Every player I've ever had is just done something at one point to either make me laugh or blow my mind. I've been very lucky.
Oh, I agree. But I think that's if a player is willing to break out of just the video game mindset and really take on the skin of who they're playing, you see that consistently. It's finding those ways to pull that out of them. Once it's out, they're good. I've never seen a player that once they've actually enjoyed role playing, they go backwards and they now start acting like murder hobos again. It doesn't make sense.
Right, exactly. They never go back to that. That's funny, isn't it?
Um, but
I've actually dealt with a player before who was totally brand new, and every time he's just sitting there, he's looking through his skills, and he's like, "I'm just trying to see what I can do, right, for this round," and I'm just like, "Give me your sheet. Okay, what would your character do right now?" He tells me, I'm like, "Okay, make a dexterity check, or make an attack roll, or whatever that vibed with whatever kooky thing that they wanted to do." I was like, "Do that. I will tell you what to roll. Don't worry about it. Don't look at this like this is game stats. Don't look at it like that.
There's
Role
two
play."
things that are useful in that respect too. Is one of them is almost exactly what you said. You take the character sheet off them, but you let them have their character sheet until it's their turn.
Mhm.
When it's their turn, and you say, "Okay, Chris, it's your turn,"
Yeah, I like that too. I like that too.
right?
I've
now you have
never
a
used
timer.
one, but I believe I might start on certain times.
This is a 1 minute timer. I think a 30-second timer would be even better, to be honest, because it's a little bit long. Honestly, I've never got to the end of the timer. It never happens because the players see the timer and they go, "Oh, make a
I
decision."
gotta think.
Always works. It's
I like that.
guaranteed to work.
Huh. I have my play. I saw two of my players pop in, so I'm like, oh, they're gonna find my tricks out. It's all right though.
Yes,
Um,
that's fantastic.
6 second
Six.
timer. Yeah, right. Exactly. That'd be cool, wouldn't it?
Yeah.
Or you can literally just start counting. I've done that too. You can just start counting 1, 2, or you can use your fingers.
I also got the for myself. I just got the phone, right? So I got my timer,
Right.
right? Little stopwatch there.
Yeah.
Yep.
Give them some of that. It's like,
Yeah. I recently ran a game set on a boat where every 10 minutes the storyline literally reset. And so there was this time loop. So I had my phone up with a 10-minute timer, and it was odd because combat would happen, and obviously time would dilate. But I would always reset it on the phone's timer, not the in-game time.
Yeah.
So it was kind of an approximation, but it worked pretty well. That was fun.
I've done that in
But yeah,
certain instances where you want things to happen in a game. Like I know my games are 3 hours, so
the schedule.
if I have a plan that so that the game persists and has some sort of structure, hour one, no matter how far they got in the story, this is going to happen and you're going to hear something about it. You might not be anywhere near it at this moment, but you're at least going to get the gist of what's going on. I did that when there was a carnival and there was an attack against the carnival, and there was a infiltration with one of the bandit or one of the people who were kind of sneaking through the carnival, finding out information, and then the assault at the end to steal something, and those types of things where hour one they got to experience the carnival and do whatever they wanted and they could choose all their things, and then hour two this person's now intervened and dancing with one of the players, sword fighting with another, having fun, and then the third hour, oh crap, now everything hit the fan and now we're trying to figure out what the hell just happened between the hour one and two. But yeah, things like that are great ways to speed up your thought process, to put your players a bit more on the spot, because one thing you want to bring to a game is tension. You don't want to bring it to the point where their blood vessels are popping out of their head and they're at a point where they're just strained to physical pain, unless you're in a moment where that's necessary. Um,
Correct.
I guarantee, the first time somebody decided they were going to go fight Strahd, there's a butt pucker moment going on because that dude's scary. Like, especially if you're
oh yeah,
bringing that mentality to him. For somebody who plays Vampire the Masquerade, being somebody who played a long time ago, bringing that version of a vampire into the world of D&D would be scary.
The thing I find, like as a storyteller, if you imagine the story as a thread, right? You're holding the thread, and you can either let it go and take off the tension, or you can tighten it and you can pull the tension. That's your job. That's your whole job. That's it. And there's a million ways to do that, but if you think of it as that's the underlying core concept of telling a story: tightening and releasing tension.
Yeah.
yeah.
So
And there's lots of tools to do that too, to help out
Yeah.
with.
I'm
Combat
writing down
tool.
all the different new topics we can go over as time goes on. The idea of how to create tension in a game.
And
Yeah, I
well,
mean,
I think that even still falls under our subject in tonight's
Oh yeah,
is
there's multiple things that
like
fall under that umbrella of how do you create an adventure.
these these are
so.
also the same questions as like, well, how many types of story are there? For example, I mean, the Greeks believed there were 12 types of story, um, for example, and they were just primarily 12 archetypes. And you can categorize everything into that. Then you can talk about things like 3-act structure. You're talking about having times during your session. You have a setup, a conflict, and a resolution. You could have a role-playing session, a combat, and a looting session,
Yeah.
or whatever. You know.
Yeah.
So yeah, that sort of stuff is pretty fascinating, isn't it?
Oh
I
yeah.
love it.
So
It's
interesting
story.
enough. Yeah. So that's how I tell my players all the time. We're not here to play a video game. We're here to write a collaborative story together. Um, Now, I'm
Okay.
doing this because it's
Consensus.
a D&D pod or show. Is I took the DM's guide and I pulled up chapter 3 on my screen, and it says the best ways to build an adventure. Now I'm going to read these and I'm going to see what your guys' opinions are of this. So, a credible threat, familiar tropes with a clever twist, a clear focus on the present, heroes who've mattered, something for all players, and a surprise. Now, those, to me, most of those sound like things we've went over. But is there any in there that you kind of are like, we can put this on the back burner?
Oh, I
Could we go
don't.
through them one at a time and maybe discuss each point?
Sure. We don't
So
have
I
a
can't remember
we
all
don't have a
of
ton
them.
of time, but
Great stuff.
if everybody, I mean, we've got a
1 minute per round.
huge group tonight though,
1
so I'm
minute for each
happy
point.
to go longer. So a credible threat. What's your
So
guys'
this is like an ogre wanders into the city, for
Yeah,
example,
yeah.
or a war is about to happen, or some thugs jump out and ambush the party, or something
Planetary
like this.
alignment and a great portal
Right, long-term.
into the abyss.
Yeah.
Like
Long-term threats. Yeah,
So you need something,
short-lived.
some sort of reason to go
Creates
be an
tension.
adventure. Um,
Right, it creates motivation and tension. And it's very broad because it's about survival and it's very universal, so all the characters can easily get on board with that.
yeah, yeah. The
Yep,
mad
absolutely.
king that starts taking over, or the abominable threat that's coming from the abyss somewhere in the middle of nowhere that's getting ready to attack the material
Yep,
plane.
that totally works. I mean, I'm using these things right now in
Yeah,
various games at the same time, so
yeah,
But
this is definitely a thing.
if you're just wanting to dip your toes, though, because like a lot of people are just starting right now, especially with everything that's going on, you don't really have places you can go out and do stuff. People are getting a lot more started on this kind of game, and it doesn't hurt to have a DM that literally has like I have a name of a town, and you're gonna start in a town, and then I'm gonna use like they give you tables to roll on. So I've had people just starting off. So it was literally my buddy who was eventually my DM and his brother-in-law, and it was just the two of them, right? So it was like, and it was one of the funnest things that they ever did with D&D, and it was literally just this town where you're dropped in. There's certain groups of people here and there, and it was just like the player was like, I'm doing D&D. I'm gonna play this like video game. I'm gonna go in and just hack and slash, and it didn't turn out in his favor, right? So he had to restart it, and they used the a lot of the table charts to kind of progress and tell the story and everything. And for just starting out and just kind of getting a vibe to see if you even want to invest the time and effort into the game, that's a good way to start. You know what I'm saying? So it's not like all
Done
these
very
things.
broadly.
Yeah, all these things are really, really good points. Everything in that list is an excellent point if you're getting into being a veteran player
yeah.
and you're wanting to really, really get into the game. But if you're just dipping your toes, grab some charts online that tell you, roll a d100 and
Like,
see
this
what
is
happens.
specifically from a DM's perspective you're talking about, isn't it? Like, as a new player, you can join in with a veteran DM and play
Yeah,
a complicated storyline and
Yeah.
still have a lot of fun. In fact,
Right.
have
Yeah.
a shit ton of fun.
yeah, exactly. But if you're two new people that just didn't have the resources to get a group, because
Yeah, you can
I wasn't
take that
capable.
very simple kind of start with one point and expand the universe from the point with which you start. You can either start from the inside out or from the outside in,
Yeah.
and
which is
and
different. Because I
that's
start with a theme, as I said before, examination of a central question, and I build my whole world
mhm.
basically to examine that question. Everything is designed to reflect that one question and to highlight the various possibilities of it, as opposed to from the inside out, where you're starting with a town and you're building up gradually, and that can go very haphazardly, right?
Oh yeah,
But
oh yeah, for sure.
which is cool. There's a chaos to that, which is kind of exciting because you don't know where it's going, and even you as the DM don't know where it's going. And you can also discover that there is a theme in it you're actually revealing your own subconscious biases by
Yeah.
doing that. which is fascinating too.
It's just a good way to introduce yourself to the game.
Right. Yeah, that's true. I think for first-time DMs, that's definitely the best approach.
Yeah. I think that's where you kind of come into the difference between an external conflict and an internal conflict. So the way you're bringing in stuff like greed, or the one you said was essentialism, is that the one you're working?
Yeah, like
Yeah.
essentialism is the one I'm working on at the moment.
So those types of things, they're not tangible. You can't just grab it and understand what it is. You say, "Hey, the ogre's attacking the town." That's external. You understand immediately there's a threat, and this is how you do things. And for a
But
brand
you
new
can tie
game
that into
master,
essentialism.
yes,
You can still,
yeah,
you can do both.
yeah. But for a game master who's brand new and who has very little knowledge of, or is just trying to understand how to play, external conflicts are just as good. And then sooner or later you'll notice there'll be internals growing. So the second one, and that's kind of where this goes, is familiar tropes with clever twists. I don't know how many people use the Lord of the Rings. I'm going to go venture to get this thing and kill this because this will save the world. Use it. Use it till the
Like, collect the 7 swords of blah blah and do the thing. I'm still doing that shit.
yeah, exactly. We all do it because it's fun, it's exciting, and then you make your own mixture to it.
Okay, so there's three things here, right? There are cliches, there are tropes, and there are genre conventions, and they are all overlapping. So, I mean, the difference between a cliche and a trope is it's just a well-worn trope. It's worn so thin now that everyone's sick of it. They're bored with it, and it's now a cliche. And it's also cliches have a kind of a negative element to them, like cultural cliches where we think of things, and in fact they become stereotypes, actually.
Right.
And then you've got the tropes themselves, which are just basically story elements, and then you have the what was it? Genre conventions,
Yeah.
right? So like the idea, like the 7 swords to save the world or whatever, those are genre conventions. The audience expects those things. If they weren't there, it wouldn't be high fantasy.
Right.
You know what I mean? Like, okay, you could tell a high fantasy story without specific tropes, but people are expecting some tropes. And if
Correct.
they're not there, they're the things that people get excited about. I get excited about that whole notion of collect the artifacts and save the
Yeah.
world.
Yeah.
It's
Collect all the. I
Yeah,
mean, there's all sorts in Dungeons and Dragons and all sorts of books and movies. And this is why people go and watch these things, and this is why people read books, and this is why people come and play the games, is to interact with these thought processes. The one thing I tell people all the time is you can go to a movie and you can watch it, you can read a book and you can learn about it, or you can come into games like D&D and you can do it. You can be a part of it. And I think that is the exciting part of what tabletop gaming does for you, and that really brings into the idea of a clear focus on the present, and it's you're involved, and everything that's happening is not because of some character that was designed for this. No, it's your character, and it's your mental, emotional, and physical capabilities that you've put into your character, either through a stat or through actual role play, and both can come out very easily. The best parts of players, though, is the ones that can read a stat and understand how to role play it.
exactly right.
Yeah,
Exactly. Now, when you can take like a dice roll for example
yeah,
too. Seeing, oh, you failed your dice roll. Well, why? What were you thinking about that caused you to fail your perception check? Where was your brain?
yeah,
What were you thinking about? And you give the agency back to the player because, oh my god, I screwed up my roll. I feel so bad. I don't have any agency because I can't do the thing. Oh, but the DM's asked me why I've screwed it up. Now I get to be creative again,
yes.
and so that gives me agency back again,
yeah,
even though I rolled a 1.
yeah,
And that's actually failure. I mean, in drama, when it comes to film and television and theatre and books, drama is conflict, or conflict is drama, whichever way you want to look at it. And so when you fuck shit up in game, this is good. It creates drama. That's what you want. Drama is good. That's what's fun. We don't watch TV to watch a bunch of people sitting around agreeing with each other because that would be fucking tedious and boring.
agreed, 100%.
And that's where you as a DM come in, and especially you get new players, and you want to make sure flavor that. right? Just like you said, tell them, hey, go ahead and give me that juicy, juicy flavor that you know we love oh so much.
Yeah.
And more often than not, they come up with pure gold.
Right, and especially when that flavor isn't just flavor for the sake of flavor, but it relates to their character. It somehow is intrinsic to who they are, to the sort of archetypes within the character. Who is this character, and why is it? So the Eldritch Blast is green. Is it green just because it's green, or is it green because I don't know? They're a nature related creature. I don't know. I'm just pulling shit out of my ass right now.
Yeah.
But there are much deeper things than simply flavor for the sake of flavor. Do you know what I mean?
Oh yeah.
It relates to the character's personality and depth.
Yeah.
That's when it becomes really powerful.
So we did something like that last night in our game. Everybody, when they went to sleep, they all had a dream, and the idea was I just told people, I was like, hey, you've been an adventurer your entire life. You're settling down. What is the one moment that you would dream about more than anything? And two of them gave extremely sad and very just ruthless dreams, and I was like, okay. And then the third one tied his entire dream to his character, and I was like, and you just built this tonight, so characters can think about things just as fast as game masters do, and giving them that agency to do it. I was so impressed by my players last night. It was absolutely a fantastic campaign.
So they weren't orphans. Just tell me they weren't orphans.
No, they weren't. None of them were orphans.
I'm just taking the piss out of that particular photo.
Yeah.
Which is
Hey,
kind
yeah.
of cliche,
Yeah.
Yeah, that meme lady gives birth. Doctor checks the class of the baby. I'm sorry, ma'am. He's a rogue. The doctor pulls out the knife. The mother says, "But I don't want to die." Right? I don't know if you guys seen that one.
Yeah.
I've seen that one for sure. Yeah.
I think
Facebook.
the
Spend a lot of time on Facebook.
the fun one, and this is the final step of our. Well, actually, no, we've got two more. I'm reading too fast. So, heroes who matter. That is kicking into placing a bit back on your players, is trying to find out where the tension's coming from, the internal tension.
There's a big value judgment here too, because we're calling them heroes. They could be anti-heroes. Well, they might not be heroes at all.
I'm playing a completely evil campaign right now, and none of them are heroes.
Are they anti-heroes? Are they?
No, they're full-on villains.
Full-on villains, right?
Yeah, and it's a lot of fun.
Seth Skorkowski made
That's
a good
awesome.
video about playing evil characters. So
Yeah,
Check that
I'll have to
out.
grab that one from you. Yeah. But so we've got heroes who matter, something for all player types. This is a game master is just a have to, because you have to play to all of your players. There is no option for this one.
Knowing your players and their characters and being a part of their backstory and their character creation process, well, that basically ties into all of that and makes it essential and
Yeah.
kind of
I run a
necessary.
Horror campaign. I run a horror campaign, and one of the stipulations for the players to play in the campaign is I need your background, and your background also must include your character's greatest dreams, aspirations, and fears.
Yeah.
exactly.
Right?
Yep.
It is a horror campaign, so there's a lot of psychological play that goes on in that campaign. And I make sure that your players they're involved. I had one player whose character was a Vatican, who was very old. Many years before this adventure started, he lost his family, his wife and his daughter. He lost them. He got there was a goldfish that he got for his daughter at a carnival, and he petrified it and made it his little pebble that he carried around. So I used all of that. So when his character's tripping out in this haunted farm, the pebble in his pocket starts to wiggle and starts to make little fish noises. And he pulls it out, and he's just like, you said there was a fish tank next to me? And I'm like, yeah, there's a little bowl there. It's like, okay, I placed my pebble in the bowl. And I'm like, okay, so when you do that, the pebble starts to cry out in the voice of your lost daughter. Daddy, no, why are you drowning me? And then the water begins to bleed. So he told me to go F myself. took his character's little pebble out of the thing, brushed it off, put it away, grabbed a knife, and he's like, "So my character's just going to stand here for the next minute, cutting into his arm, telling himself, this isn't real. This isn't real." You know, like I love it when your players give you these huge, crazy. Like I have people come to me with a background story. It's like, I'm sorry, it's like 2 pages, and I'm like, no, don't be sorry. Do not apologize.
Yeah.
This is gold. Thank you.
Yeah, so that would be an interesting one to we'll have to go over is what do you give your players to help them with their backstory? I think that'd be a good one to talk about in another time. And then the final thing we have here is surprises, and I think this is fantastic for both starting a campaign and just the mentality of the entirety of the campaign. Because a lot of the time, I'll let my players give me more. I'll be like, hey, what did you... I'm like, hey, I've got... You guys are heading to this direction. I've read your guys' backstory. This kind of sounded like it might fit in here. Do you want to add to it? And then, surprisingly enough, normally I'll make this and I'll go like this just a little bit and turn it so that they don't see it coming. But then they wait and they go, oh, he just took my idea and just ran with it, didn't he? And I was like, yeah, I did. That's exactly what my goal is to bring the world into you. Yeah.
I mean, if you study screenwriting, you have like these things called plot points, and a plot point is essentially a point in the story where the story changes direction in an unexpected way. It's a surprise,
yeah.
If you like. It's a plot point, and having these things up your sleeve as a DM, I think is really important. Like, for me personally, the best part of a game is when I've got the players role playing. I can sit back and do nothing, and I'm watching them role play, and they're all talking, and they're all in character, and they're literally role playing. And I try to make that as much of my game as possible. And then once they're deep and immersed in their role playing to the point where they're really in character and it's getting tense,
something happens.
Something happens.
Yes. I love that.
That's when the ogre bashes in the door.
Yeah.
So when it comes to writing a campaign, guys, quick question for you: Has any of you ever used like the tables that I've mentioned for like the encounter scenario tables? Have you guys ever used those before?
Back in the old days, a long time ago.
When creating, I will cruise if I'm in a point where I'm kind of like, okay, I've got this done. I need to decide what's next. And I don't usually go, okay, I'm going to look at that. No, I go through the table and I go, okay, what clicks with this story and that kind of thing.
I do a lot of introspection. Honestly, it's very much a looking inside yourself to see what comes out that relates to the characters and the story and the theme. Because the theme is your compass. If you have a theme, you have a compass. And you can now relate everything that you choose, every decision that you make. I learned this from filmmaking. This is a directing thing. Every single thing that you add to your game is related to your theme. And now everything points in that direction. There's a consistency in the narrative that it permeates every wall and every texture and every color, every thread of cloth, and everybody's costume somehow relates to this theme. Everything you describe is reinforcing the theme, right? So you have themes, objectives, and super objectives, and between those things, it's all there. And then if you want to go through tables, you can see whether the things in the tables relate to your theme. That's a good idea.
Yeah.
But don't use random stuff.
Yeah. I've done that before. I have a campaign that a good part of it runs in a very large city that's separated into several districts, each district belonging to a school of magic. And I do have a table. What I did with my table for that was make sure that everything was something that you could see in an industrious city. And then I would roll on the table. And sometimes I didn't even use what I rolled if I felt like, and I'd always do it before the session so that I can look at what I rolled and see like, okay, this is my notes. Does this fit in? No, maybe next time.
Also, your choice of table can be within the theme as well. So, that if you choose the table that seems to be most related to the story that you're telling. I'm not going to choose a table that's completely up there.
Yes, I would definitely say if you're ever going to use a table to maybe homebrew it yourself.
Yeah.
I think that would be a really great way.
And don't be afraid to re-roll things.
Oh, yeah, no.
No, definitely not.
you're in control, or even just choose things.
Adjacent. I've done
Sometimes you
that
might,
before.
right? Sometimes you might want to make it sort of random, but you don't have to.
Yeah.
The players don't know the difference.
Yeah.
No, they definitely don't.
So
Yeah.
I hope you all
So how are we
had
doing
a.
for time?
We are 12 minutes over, which I am perfectly okay with. Um, did anybody have any final questions for either of our other game masters or myself before we close out for the night? So give a couple minutes. We'll give a minute or so. Need to have music for this point.
There we go. There we go.
Oh,
Yes.
there we go. Yeah, you all have to
All
think.
right, guys. All right, get
Time, yeah.
ready. Playing your turns.
The time is ticking.
Yeah. So that's it. You plan your turn while it's everybody else's turn. You listen to what's
Yep.
going on, and then when it's your turn, you turn your character sheet over
And you
and
be ready.
you describe your action. You have your bonus action ready. You ask any pertinent questions about movement. And you do the thing.
Julie, do the thing.
30 seconds.
30 seconds.
If somebody doesn't come up with a question, I'm going to be really disappointed because I'm holding this thing for like a whole minute.
Come on, we got one final question. Somebody's got to have one.
Come on, somebody's got one, Chris.
We've got a good crew tonight too, so somebody's got to have something.
Yeah, I hope by the
10
next time we
seconds.
do our next episode, I'll have a link for everybody too. Like I said, I will be starting my own stream within the coming weeks. It is Crows of the Damned, a D&D horror campaign. The campaign title is Dungeons and Dragons versus the Evil Dead. So I'm really
Awesome.
looking forward to that. Oh, we're out. Sorry.
Oh, all
I'm
right.
streaming in 4 hours, 3 hours and
Oh my
45 minutes,
goodness.
I'll be running the Vein Gate Chronicles.
Sorry to hear that. That sounds like no sleep whatsoever. But you're also on the other side of the world, so this is kind of.
Yeah, it's 3 o'clock in the afternoon right now for me, so I've got some time.
Yeah, but
So I will have to act quickly.
do either of you, have a final comment you'd like to give to our viewers on what their core focus should be when they start building a campaign?
I think
Simple.
what Chris said at the beginning is exactly right. The players. Focus on the players. Focus on their characters, and then maybe think about a theme. And
Also, possibly.
one last thing I'm just going to say. Sorry, Chris.
No worries.
You're not solving cancer. It's a fucking game. Don't take it too seriously.
Thank you. Yeah, no, absolutely. I have to agree with you. Your players are key, and they will make the game for you, and you'll be grateful for it. Concentrate on your players. Don't worry, and try to keep things simple. A lot of people, you want to write. Don't write too complicated. You're not, you're not, like I said, not trying to cure cancer. You're not writing the Da Vinci Code here. Try to keep it simple, and just really have fun. Just keep that in mind. This is supposed to be fun.
Yeah, no,
That's
that
it.
is
If you're not having fun,
big
you're
one.
doing it wrong.
That's a big one. Yeah, if you are not having a good time, both as the game master and the players, then you need to reevaluate the story and the scenario.
I
So
also have to just say one last thing too. Sorry, I
Sure.
already said that before, but I think that, like, as far as prep goes, like, prep is a huge part of DMing. But if you're not having fun doing that prep, nobody's going to kill you if you don't actually prep the game. You could literally go in there and fly with your hands to the seat of your pants all the way through the game, and there's a 50% chance the players won't even know that you didn't do any planning.
Guilty.
Done this, right? How many of us have done that? You go into a
I
game,
ran it last night, and my players knew it, and they still had a blast. So
right, just pretend like you've planned it. They don't know any different.
Yeah.
Or even if they do, if they trust you to exploit the story that's there, and you can do that, then everyone will have fun.
Yep. So because we saw this pop in right at the end, real quick before we called it a night, what's your favorite type of campaign to run? Chris?
I just love heavy role play and of course horror. Obviously, that's like I love if I can do something to legit gross a player out and make them regret not taking prestidigitation, I'll do that. Like my Evil Dead campaign, if you don't have prestidigitation, you're walking around covered in guts and body parts, and that's and vomit as well. So, anything to gross out the players, and just I want reaction. I just want you guys to react to things, and I want to see how you handle those scenarios. That's really what gets me.
I tend to agree with that, and I've as I said, I've run a lot of Vampire the Masquerade, and for those reasons, that's a lot of the reasons there. I'm getting to the point where I'm also very interested in social themes, which is kind of interesting, and going and then running D&D and exploring the idea of making role playing meaningful. So, if you've ever looked into things like Jungian alchemy, which I know there's some highfalutin shit right there, that's some crazy stuff dealing with archetypes and stuff, and getting into what is meaningful for people, because I think this is like, I've got this new phrase that I've been using. Okay, this is going to blow your mind. Transpersonal initiation.
Which means
That's what D&D is. It can be. D&D can either be a simulation where you're just fucking around, rolling dice and killing orcs and kicking in doors, or it can be an initiation into your own subconscious and learning about yourself, learning about your own prejudices, learning about how you tick, and discovering things about yourself. Know thyself, right? That's a big part of life.
Oh, hey, this
And
game can be very cathartic, for
right,
sure.
catharsis and learning, education is part of it. I mean, when I say education, we tend to think of children, but adults don't have to stop learning just
No.
because they're grown up.
No, absolutely.
So nothing but talking wank. So,
oh no, you both are. I mean, I don't have much to say. They took it all from me, but yeah. The final thing that I would say for my favorite type of campaign to run is one that immediately immerses the players. That the players don't see the way I put it is if I'm sitting at a table, I don't want my players within that time frame to realize that 3 hours have passed. I want you to be so immersed into the game that you've forgotten your surroundings and you have immersed yourself completely.
Hey, it's like, what's that? Oh wow, the sun's rising. Cool.
Yeah.
Roll.
Yeah, roll. Yeah. So.
guys, I think we probably should. I don't know. Are we wrapping up?
I think we are wrapping up. So thank you.
Way to do.
Thank you again, Russell, for coming to hang out with us tonight. Chris, it's great to have you back.
I was really excited to see that you joined, Russell. I was.
Thank
I've
you.
seen your stuff before. It was great. It was good
Yeah.
having
Wow.
you.
Please
Thank you, guys. I appreciate it.
check out his stream. We are trying to promote and build a community of streamers and a community of D&D and let me rephrase it, not D&D, storytelling enthusiasts for this stream and for our overarching goal, because we don't have much right now. Everybody's stuck in a home or not able to associate with others, and it's a great outlet to meet amazing people, just like these two and the hundreds of other people that we've met over the last 2 years. So again, thank you both for coming, and until next time, have a drink, enjoy an adventure, and we will see you next week.
Thanks for having us, James.
Night, guys.